I really appreciate that. Now, I've got another question for you. You
Sure.
did great on this first one, flying colors, my friend. And so who can and how can we be prepared to handle the office politics?
That is a great one as well. So you're asking who can and how can we be prepared to handle
Yeah, yeah,
office politics?
that's right.
And you know why I think that's such a good question, first off, right? Because not only are we sometimes our worst critic, but
Yeah,
very often we're the first to think that something's beyond us or we can't do it. Or I've been right, or I've been doing this such I'm too old for this, or I can't do it. For anybody that's tried to learn a foreign language, right? It's a it literally there's a reason why I'm like, this is like a foreign language to me. You can't understand it, you don't know it, it seems overwhelming. But
right.
you put the time in, you work at it over time, you engross yourself in that culture where you don't have a choice, and then suddenly progression is made. I'm watching that with my boys right now. I enrolled them in a dual immersion school.
Oh,
So
great.
yeah, I was a little nervous at first, but I had some friends that went through it because they're young, but half of their courses are in English, half of them are in Spanish.
That's
So
awesome.
right? But they're picking it up. They're learning it. Something that was foreign to them, they're now picking up.
Right.
It's that same thing when we're talking about office politics, when we're talking about the organizational game, when we're trying to change the narrative for ourselves so that instead of I love Hamilton, right? I want to be in the room where it happened, right? To be in that spot where now instead of always figuring out why not me, being able to celebrate, right? It's me, and how am I going to help somebody else?
Yeah, that's
So and you got to be prepared, right? Or how are we going to get prepared for that?
right.
That first is getting past that mental block. And
Mm.
it's like a lot of other things we talk about, right? You don't know what you don't know. And
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
I'll give an example of that. And it's still, I wish I had these experiences myself, but this is again, I'm going to go back to Harvey Coleman again. And this was great. The book was great, but watching him in person was fantastic because I'm like looking at living history, give their life experiences.
Right.
And what he said was again, it was another thing in that room that people were like, but he was talking about when he was going through IBM and he was going through up the stuff. One of the VPs there, one of the officers brought his kid in. In fact, I think it was the president of IBM. It was definitely a person higher up,
Higher up.
and he
Okay.
right upper, and he brought his kid in right out of high school. Maybe he was right out of college. I don't remember, but he brought his kid in, and his kid started in the mailroom. That's the important part of the story to remember. His kid started in the mailroom. Tony, how long do you think his kid stayed in the mailroom?
Usually 2, 3 years, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. The kid he kind of made a fast progression. So he went from the mailroom to the floor to sale, and just skyrocketed up the organization into which he was in a very senior position very early on.
Wow.
Now, what do you call that most of the time? What are some
Ambition.
words?
Ambition.
Ambition, right? And I'll say for the real, some people say, yeah, that's nepotism. He came in,
Nepotism. Okay. Yes.
that's
Yes.
nepotism, right? He knew his dad got him the gig, and then he put him in the mailroom, but he went through and he got up to the top,
Right.
right? Nepotism, favoritism, whatever you want to call it,
Yes, that's right. That's right.
right? And Harvey Coleman, he was like, nope, nepotism. He's like, no, he was that leader. He had that kid, even though he was fresh out of college,
Right.
he was prepared all his life for that role,
Mm.
right? And I want to keep this, I'm going to get keeping it real, right? The perspective for this is this was a diverse, this was the group that was getting this training was a very diverse group.
Right.
So even more so when he said that, they were like, but here's the lesson that he laid for that. He said, in likening it to what we all try to do for any of us that are parents, what do we try to do? We try to prepare our kids, we try to put them in the best possible position to succeed. So we
Right.
teach them everything we can. I just told you I have my kids in a dual immersion. It's a public school. I moved close so that we were nice and close by the school, but I put them in a dual immersion school living in Arizona
Right.
because learning a different language, in this case Spanish, it's a competitive advantage,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
On so many different levels.
Yeah.
That's what we try to do. We try to whatever we do, we try to make our kids put them in that position so it's a little bit better for them, a little
Yeah.
bit easier for them. My parents did it for me to put me in this position. I hope to do it for my kids.
Yeah.
Well, he was saying that executive, right? He he had his kids in the best schools early on. He had his kids getting tennis lessons early on. He
Right.
had his kids getting um, how to play an instrument, a violin, in all these social circles.
Mm,
He had his kids at an early age, inviting them to those meetings to know in this network setting or this corporate setting how to act and how to respond and how all this. He had his kid in one of the best colleges, right, which prepared them for the work life and prepared them of how to hit the ground running and how to be effective leaders and how to report and all those other things that we are key flash words for success, right? In order
right.
to be successful in today's world. So
Yes.
that kid, even though 22 or whatever time he came in there, had had all that preparation. So yeah, you're going to put him in the mailroom to get him out starting to knowing all the different parts of the company, but he was groomed for that role. So the
Right.
lesson he was saying was you can call it nepotism, you can call it favoritism, you can call it whatever type of nism you want,
Right.
but he belonged and he knew how to act, he knew how to roll in that group.
Yeah. Yeah.
So again, that lesson came out and everyone was, not everybody agreed. There was a lot of drama about it, but what was the lesson that I took from it? Right? Um, that young man was successful in that role because he had all of that exposure, that training, so that he knew how to play. He knew how to look. He knew how to speak in a language that he was going to be successful in that IBM setting,
Right.
right?
Right.
You don't know what you don't know. So for many of us, right? My father, my mother didn't have those same advantages.
Right.
No one took the time to tell them how to uh, ground. I mean, they were working. I think my dad had to drop out of school at a young age just to work and get in. He
Right.
did the best he could for me, but I, I didn't have that, and unless somebody imparted that to me, I wouldn't have known.
Right.
So
Right.
that's when I think about these organizational games, these little things. Just because we're starting late in the game doesn't mean that we can't play the game, and doesn't mean that we can't play the game really well, and doesn't mean that we can't win.
Right. I
So
love.
now, right? It's
Yep.
a matter of taking this knowledge in. If I know that exposure is so important, and I know that my image and my brand is so important, and now suddenly I know that for these bigger type roles that I'm going for, they need to know me before that position is even up posted. They
Mm,
need to have me in mind as a potential candidate before that position even goes to HR for them considering it.
right.
Well, now I know the rules of the game.
Right.
And
That's
if I know the rules of the game, I can play the game, I can compete in the game, I can play a good game,
yeah. That's right.
but now I have a chance to win. And
Yeah.
we all have a chance to win.
Yeah. I love that. And I do want to just talk about real quick that
Yeah.
starting somebody in the mailroom
Yeah.
in the nepotism that I know, and I wasn't allowed to be promoted to VP because I didn't have my bachelor's degree. So I went back and got my bachelor's. Took me 5 years while I was working. Um,
Congratulations.
and I got it when I turned 50, right?
Wow.
I was
Yeah.
late in the game, but doing what I can to catch up. But the most important things, people were bringing as a senior director managing everything technical for this medical supply company. Um, they were bringing in the CEO's son for to be on my team so I could kind of teach them and groom them. And then they immediately jumped up to being a director after a year. And then a year later, they became a VP. And then now they're running a sales team for our company. And I'm like, hey, who am I? Chopped liver? Hold on a second. I took it personal, but I didn't realize, right? It's just part of the game, right? And so here's what I see normally in nepotism in the game is that people are moved immediately to the top.
Yep.
So I love your story from the sense, and it's actually, you're sharing the story from somebody else. I love this story from the sense that they started him in the mail room. Because normally in nepotism, they skip the mailroom altogether. And I truly believe to even somebody who has the experience to be at the top, by starting at the bottom and earning their way up, they actually get to see the whole business from all different perspectives before they get to a place where they're making decisions. And so I do know that this does happen. It's part of it. And by the way, that dad whoever that is of nepotism, that dad knew about the exposure that you're talking about here. And because of that, used their networking skills to get their son or daughter or whoever to that place so they could be there because they've been groomed their whole life. Well, they're actually, even though it may be nepotism and it has a negative connotation, they're actually doing the same thing you're doing by having your sons, learn Spanish, right? You're getting them exposed to things that could help them in their journey, their path. You just don't know when it's going to happen, but you want them to be prepared. And I think that's an important lesson, which is you're not always going to get to exactly where you want, but you need to just kind of sit and be prepared and do all the get exposure, get your degree,
Mhm.
get a different language, do all the things that enable you to be prepared to take that next step so you're ready. And then when you're ready, people know you. Because that's most time where people get into really good jobs is from people that know you, that exposure. And now you've got all this, what I call your toolkit, right?
Yeah.
You're moving up with your toolkit, but you were already using the toolkit already. And so,
I, I love that. And I got to tell you, right? So in this, and even as you were expressing and sharing your example too, a couple of things resonated with me. So, and this is a reminder for your viewers and for the viewers that are listening to this. When
yeah,
we're talking about this, all like the example that I provided, or even when Tony was talking about, right, when he was trading up the person who then got the VP position, then went on, we're not we're not talking about what's fair. We're not talking about what's right.
love it.
We're not talking about how things should happen in an
Ex-
ideal world.
Exactly.
We're talking about organizational politics. We're talking about the organizational game. So
That's right.
let's be crystal clear on that too, right? In an ideal world, everything's fair. You're judged on your their merits, and
Right.
it's an even playing field. That's just not the world we live in today. That's the goal that we all have. And
Yeah.
I'm sure any of us that have been in situations before where we've been overlooked
Yeah.
or looked down on or didn't get that role that we know we were qualified for,
Right. That's right.
part of the advantage of learning this game, right? To be able to play it. Because then once you get into those positions, you know how to make it a fairer playing field for everybody. And that's what this part of this conversation, these tech talk Tonys are for. This is helping to level the field for all of us so that we know how the game is played and we can be successful. So.
100%. Man, I couldn't have said it better myself. Listen.